Hey, good morning. This is Joe Yudin from Touring Israel Luxury Private Tours and episode 4 of our podcast. Because you can't come to Israel, I thought I'd bring a little bit of Israel to you. Today, we're going to talk to Adam Sela. Adam Sela owns a sports adventure company down in the Negev Desert near the Machtesh. You guys know it as a crater, even though technically it's not a crater, it's a Machtesh. And he has a very interesting background, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his history and what he does now in the desert. Adam, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
So briefly, like a minute, why don't you give us a little bit of background? Where do you come from? Why did you come to Israel? Why did you settle down in the desert?
So I was born and brought up in Kenya, where I lived until I was 18. When I was 18 and was looking to sort of strike out and get life going, I decided I'd do it somewhere else, and came across to Israel to have a look, see what was going on here. I was a volunteer on a kibbutz for a while. Got into an argument on politics and stuff like that when I was just a volunteer. And the guy I was arguing with said that I didn't really have a right to have an opinion until I'd seen everything, and dared me to join the army, and I did.
Did that change your opinion about anything?
It did. In all honesty, it did. It gives you a sort of a better appreciation for what we have to deal with, and how we should deal with it. It definitely changed me.
Yeah, that happened to me as well. I was a real, left-wing hippie attitudes that, all we need to do is, pull out of all the settlements and everything will be fine and we'll have peace and the age of Aquarius. And then I went and did the army, and I wouldn't say I became an extreme right-wing fanatic, but my views definitely moved into the center.
My wife teases me that I'm a sort of a liberal at heart, but I have a very right-wing understanding of security issues. And she can't understand how the two can sort of exist in the same person.
Did she do the army?
She did. She did a very, very sort of very meaningful service, but not doing that sort of thing. She was in the education corps.
Oh, interesting. So you came to Israel. How did you end up in? What did you do in the army exactly?
I was in Nachal Mutznach for the first 2.5 years until I was, until I finished my my sort of main service. And reserves, I was a sapper for many years, and today I'm in the reserves in search and rescue and paramedic.
Oh, okay. So before we get into your search and rescue, I'm really interested in hearing some things about that. What made you settle down in the Negev? Where did you settle down in the Negev? Was it a Zionist, idealistic thing that you wanted to be a pioneer, like David Ben-Gurion, our first prime minister, said, "Go south, young man, and settle in the desert and make it bloom"? Or, how did you end up there, and where exactly?
Well, that probably I was, when I was being brought up in Kenya, I spent most weekends out and sort of in the bush exploring. So I came with an adventurous spirit, great love for the wilderness, for the outdoors. And when I was in the army, a lot of the training was done in the desert regions. So I learned to sort of love that region. When people do the army, they either come out of the army hating the desert or loving the desert. Right. I came out loving it. And when I finished the army, I was in Tel Aviv for 6 or 7 years. It was just too much of a intense experience. And I decided I'd rather sort of live in an area that was more far-flung. And I think it's I don't like crowds. I don't like busy. I don't like sort of everything that comes with living in the center of the country. And decided that I'd drag my wife screaming and begging for mercy down to the Negev.
Oh, that's
And
interesting coming from a Jewish couple that you dragged your wife down there and not your wife dragged you somewhere else. That's interesting. So where exactly do you live now?
well, I lived we lived for the first 10 years of our time here in the Negev in Mitzpe Ramon, on the edge of the Ramon Maktesh.
Mhm.
And then about 18 years ago, we decided we'd move to Midreshet Ben Gurion, which is just south of Kibbutz Sde Boker.
Mhm.
And we moved for reasons of social education, stuff like that. Mitzpe Ramon was a little bit trying. It's a great little town, but the population tends to be in and out the whole time. So
Mhm.
you're constantly making and losing friends. And
So where you live in the adjacent to the kibbutz that David Ben-Gurion retired to and actually worked to, and where he's buried, and overlooks the wilderness of Zin, where which is actually part of the story of the Exodus when Moses takes out the children of Israel from Egypt. One of the places they wander is the wilderness of Zin, and it's interesting when you take us down on Jeep tours. There's a lot of water in the wilderness of Zin in the middle of the desert, isn't there?
Well, everything's relative. You know, I often hear of, especially youth groups or Taglit groups who are coming to Birthright.
Right.
And we love to show our guests water in the desert. And
Right.
we love to see water in the desert ourselves. And I've heard more than once people say, yeah, well, you know, we don't understand what the water problem is. All we've seen is water.
Right.
Because we tend to show people highlights.
Right.
They're few and far between in terms of sources of water, which is what made them so important back then. Today we have water pipes, you know, water mains and stuff like that. But you know, up until 80, 90 years ago, you had to use what available water there was, which is very little. Today, life is much, much easier.
Right. So Jono has a few pictures of one of your Jeep excursions. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, about doing some Jeep tours and ATV tours and bike tours in the Maktesh and the Negev, not necessarily in the Maktesh, which a lot of people know the Maktesh is a crater, which is incorrect. It's not a crater. It's maybe you can tell us even what a Maktesh is. There you are in the Maktesh.
I want to leave that for when people come and we can really show them.
Okay.
But basically, it's a massive erosive cavity. There are 7 of this type in the whole world. 5 of those are in Israel. 2 of them in northern Sinai cannot be visited. So the only ones that you can visit are the ones that we have. The Ramon is the biggest of them all, and it's so big that you could actually get the other 6 into it at the same time. So it's far bigger than all of the others, and you really have to see it to really understand and to really believe it. But it's just one small portion of this massive wilderness region, which accounts for almost 60% of Israel's entire territory and has just 15% of Israel's population living in that area. So it's a very sparsely populated region, which is what I find is very attractive to me. And you can go for hours without seeing a settlement or other people and stuff like that. On the shorter tours, we sort of run into other people who are also doing shorter tours. But if we choose to go off the beaten track on a sort of camping safari or a long hike or a mountain bike ride, then we can spend hours or even a couple of days without running into anyone except for our logistical team.
All right, you've actually done that for us before. We've had several people who hiking the Israel Trail, the Cross Israel Trail, which starts in Tel Dan on the border of Syria and Lebanon, all the way in the north on the Dan River, and runs all the way down through the Galilee, through the coastal plain, the Judean desert, and into the Negev desert, and through your area. And you've actually done, you know, the logistical support for people crossing the Negev on foot and sleeping outdoors. There you are, actually running the. I guess that's in Hebrew we call it snappling, which is a play on the word snap. It in America we call it rappelling. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So rappelling is something that mountaineers do at the end of a climb to get back down, or canyoneers or cave explorers do to get into cave systems and into canyons and stuff like that. Here in Israel, it developed as a in inverted commas sport. So people come just to do the rappel. So it's a great chance to conquer one's fear and get used to the idea of trust in equipment, trust in other people, trust in one's own abilities to conquer fear of heights and stuff like that. So when done like we're doing it here, it's just a short experience on the edge of the Ramon Maktesh, on the rim of the Maktesh. And although the rappel itself, the descent is actually quite short, because it's the upper portion of a 1,000 foot high cliff. The experience that one has is that they're going to fall if they're going to fall 1,000 feet, and not just the sort of 80, 90 feet that we're actually rappelling. Of course, no one ever falls. It's done very, very safely with two completely independent systems. One is a backup system, and to date, happily, we've never had any mishaps on doing it. But rappel, or abseil, as it's called in Germany, is got a really bad reputation over the years, because it is done at the end of a climb, and people are tired and in a hurry, and they forget to do stuff, or they anchor into ice, which melts during the day. There are dangers when you do it that way, but when you do it the way that we do it, with all the anchor points that we have and stuff, it's completely safe, and a really, really great way to conquer one's fear of heights and have an exhilarating experience, and what at first seems to be very dangerous, but in the end turns out to be very, very safe.
Right. When I'm designing tours for people, when Jono and Yogev and I are designing tours for people, we tell them, oh, you got to go down to the Maktesh and stay in the Breshid Hotel or the nearby Six Senses that is just opening up in the Arava desert. And while you're there, you should do a Jeep tour with Adam, or a mountain bike tour in the desert, or an ATV, but you definitely need to do, for exactly what you say, to conquer your fears, the rappelling in the Maktesh. And people are like, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to do it. It's dangerous. And then we explain to them that a commander in the Israeli search and rescue team is going to be making sure that you're safe. So how did you get into the search and rescue team? What's it like? What are some of the experiences that you've been through? Tell us a little bit about that.
So search and rescue teams were begun by groups of people like myself back in the late 80s, early 90s. I was part of the founding team for the Negev Highlands Search and Rescue Team. We set up in 91, 92 as a group of people who had unique skills. I was already a rappelling instructor back then. I knew my way around the desert. And the idea was to take people who had the basic skills, bring them together, and to volunteer using those skills to help people who might be in their distress. So while search and rescue teams in other parts of the world may train people for sometimes years before they become fully trained, we decided that we were going to put as little into training as possible back then, and take people who had the skills to begin with. So back then I was a wilderness guide, a rappelling instructor. So I came with those skills, and since then I've added extra skills onto those. But the idea was just to try and bolster the capabilities of the government services to do stuff like this. And in fact, we can do it better because it is our own backyard. And today we have 8 different regional search and rescue teams around the country. Our team is responsible for the largest territory of any other team. Almost 30% of Israel's territory is serviced by our team. It's a large area, but we don't get that many call-outs. There are smaller teams with small areas who get more call-outs. What's special about our area is that, and our real speciality is that search part of the search and rescue. In order to rescue, you first have to find who it is that you want to rescue. And what's different about our area is that we had to learn to do the search rather than just go get. So that's the big difference. The other big difference that we had is that almost all of our volunteers all had a daytime job, if you will, which meant that we actually preferred to get whatever's done to get it done as soon as it came up. So while other teams were hanging around to wait till the next day, we were working through the night and not waiting for the next day. So as soon as a call comes in, we get it done, no matter what time of day, weather, whatever. And so we've developed the search aspect of it greatly. The rescue aspect we weren't so good at back in the day, but today we've bolstered that hugely, and we've changed the way that we respond, and the number of people, and so this is a group of doing swiftwater rescue. Although this is a desert, we do get flash floods, and flash floods are different from rivers that you guys have elsewhere, because as you can see, the water is dirty, which makes it much heavier. It's carrying a huge load of silt and sand and even rocks, and that gives the water much more power than a clear stream or a clear river, and it requires special skills.
Right, it could be a clear day, and people are hiking through the wadi. They call them auroras out west in the western United States. And it could be raining up in the mountains, 10, 20 miles away. And all of a sudden there'll be a flash flood filled with, just as you said, with silt, with rocks, with boulders even, and just can sweep people away. So describe to us, how dangerous is this? How do you go about, rescuing people who get stuck in the middle of a roaring flash flood in the middle of the desert? We use the term flash flood, but in actual fact, if you know your geography and your hydrology and weather systems, if you're a true professional in the region, and you know the region, you're never surprised by a flash flood. Okay, you learn to read the weather, if you will. So what's different from our area from other areas is that the collection basins, that collect the water, are larger than many of the others. But there's very little going on over the horizon, on the other side of the horizon. So the kind of floods that you refer to are more common in the Judean desert, for instance, where you can be down near the Dead Sea on a lovely sunny day, but it rained in the Jerusalem mountains a few hours back, and you get surprised. Here in this region, there's less chance of that. But at the end of the day, it's all to do with knowing what you're doing and how to do it. And one of our most popular tours are flash flood tours. People who want to come and see what's going on, to experience it, to see a desert full of water is an amazing experience. Right. But and they always ask, isn't it dangerous? And the answer is, if you do anything in an unprofessional manner, it can be dangerous. But if you know what you're doing, and you take a sort of measured risks or no risks at all, because you know what is a risk and what is safe to do, then it's perfectly safe. Right. That's interesting that you bring that up. So there's lots of little companies in Israel who do tour activities and provide services for tourists. And, every tour guide, every Tom, Dick, and Harry believes that he can, run a professional, safe business. And sometimes that's not true. They don't have the correct insurance, or they don't go to the right people when they're doing adventure type activities. And one of the things I'm very careful with is who, I'm putting these people and their families in the hands of, I need to put them in the hands of professionals who take every safety precaution, who have all the regular insurance and permissions from the government. And we don't take chances. And that's why when I'm doing these desert tours, I'll only use you and your company. Although there are other companies that are excellent, but I definitely keep my put my trust 100% in you and your team. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the foreign rescue that you and your team has done in places like Nepal?
So our team has sent representatives to Turkey, to Nepal, and for training missions in the US, in France, and in Switzerland, and in different places. Because I'm self-employed, I don't often make the time to go on these. But after the Nepal earthquake, I did make that time. And I went across to Nepal on a 2-week medical mission. We went across with a group that was funded by a non-profit organization called Israelife. They put together a group of 22 volunteers, all of us volunteers. And we flew across to Nepal, landed in Kathmandu, based ourselves in Kathmandu. And Israel put more people on the ground than all the other countries in the world put together.
That's really amazing.
Save for one, and I believe, and I always say that the unsung heroes of the Nepalese earthquake, without a doubt in my mind, were the Indians, who are completely overlooked. We talk about all the aid that went across there, and what the rest of the world doesn't realize is just how much the neighbor, India, did there. And they did a whole lot there, and were not recognized for it. But relative to the other countries, okay, India aside, Israel put more people on the ground faster than all the other countries did. But our team went across independently of the main group. And while everyone else was digging bodies out of ruins like the ones that you can see here, we decided to take a little different approach, and we decided to do a mobile triage. So we would every day we would go out to 2 or 3 different locations around Kathmandu, and we'd set up a sort of mini ER, if you will, to treat the people who were not seriously enough injured in order to need hospitals, but their condition might be life-threatening. So if you're in the kind of climate that you have in Nepal, and you have deep cuts or a broken bone, and you couldn't get to the hospitals because they were full, there was no transport, you didn't have the time because you're looking after your family and stuff like that, people were just lying around developing infectious sores and stuff like that. So we set up these mobile ER centers in the little villages. Sometimes we would relocate 2 or 3 times a day, and we would just treat the people who had the little injuries. But in the long run, they would probably be more life-threatening than many of the more serious injuries, especially in countries like Nepal, who, with all due respect, they don't have the hospital services that we're used to.
Right.
So it's saving the less mortally injured is often the best way of saving more people, rather than concentrating on the more seriously injured. And it was a great opportunity to see the world, meet the people, lend a helping hand, and do something meaningful for the people who otherwise would have been overlooked.
Great. So, terrific. Just to shift gears for a moment, what are some of the most beautiful places in the Negev Desert that you like to bring people, without giving away too many of your secrets? Is there, 1 or 2 particular places you know what, not just the Negev, but in all of Israel. What are your, you know, you've been here a while. You've been doing these tours. What are a couple of the most interesting places to do adventure tours that you find in the country?
So I must say that we've been talking about search and rescue now. That one of the great privileges that search and rescue provides one is the opportunity to see out of the way places which are normally off limits, and at times of the day or night which are off limits. So yeah, you know, because we have to be out of nature reserves an hour before sundown, and we can only enter an hour after sunrise and stuff like that, then you get to see things at a certain time of day. So if you're doing a sort of a 10-mile hike, and the middle of the hike is something you see in the middle of the day, and then you see it in the light that you have in the middle of the day. When you're on a search and rescue mission, sometimes you can see that at twilight, and then you're seeing things in completely different, excuse the pun, light. And that the true answer to your question is that everything changes from season, day, the light, everything gives, you know, sometimes you discover completely different things just because the lighting is different or the season is different. And for me, I like sort of the big sky views. So you know, when you're out there and you're standing on a ridge in the middle of the desert, and you look around, you can't see anything from any civilization or anyone else for miles, and you feel so small, and you get a completely different take on who we are, what we are, and life. Those are the special moments, and it's not so much to do with the specific view; it's to do with the experience, with just being there. And I also have to say that one of the great things about the jobs that both you and I do is that our guests, our clients, they also are very much part of what we take out of each day that we are at work. And for me, and I'm sure also for you and for any good guide who doesn't want to get burnt or burn out, okay, it's enjoying the people that they are with. Right. So sometimes it can be a really nice group that you're with in a pretty lousy place, but they make the experience special. Or the other way around, you know, but definitely meeting people is very much part of the experience and making memories.
Right. One of the things that we've been doing with you lately that I didn't always do with you that I really liked is your stargazing experience. I know that the state of Israel recently made the Machtesh Ramon area a dark light nature reserve, and the way you do it with having a bonfire and roasting marshmallows and having a wet bar, and you know, not for everyone depending on who the clients are, and this high powered, you know, telescope that you use where you punch in the coordinates and it moves automatically and zeroes in on the how did you get into that, and what is the experience like?
Well, if you can't be out in big sky country like this without noticing what's above you. And I've always been interested in stars, but unlike the ancient peoples, I didn't pray to them or develop different beliefs, but I wanted to discover more about it. So it developed as a sort of as a hobby, which we've which is certainly developed over the past few years. And we've just put in astrophotography as well, which is use of cameras to make the experience even more interesting. But there's so much going on up there above us. And the dark, clear skies that we have in this region make it relatively easy to do. And to take someone from New York or from Chicago or any other big city around the world and put them out in the middle of the desert on a dark night and show them the heavens above is mind-blowing. And then when you start explaining and showing and things, it's a very, very interesting experience for our people. like everything that we do, we have to sort of fine tune a little according to the people. Some people want it more technical, some people want it less technical, but with the abilities that we have, we are able to take it to the level that is suitable for the specific guest that we have on any given night. And with the help of the telescopes, and now with the camera equipment, we can show things which are mind blowing. Because if I show you the sky without a telescope, you can see so much. When I put a telescope on the same section of sky, I can show you much more. When I put a camera on the telescope and show you the same section of sky, I can show you way more. So it gives people a real feeling for what's going on up there. And it doesn't compare with Hubble, right. But it's certainly better than the night sky over any urban area.
Right. Well, Adam, thank you so much. You're really one of the true pioneers of Israel, going down to the desert and creating experiences for probably by now hundreds of thousands of people over your career. And you really pioneered the tourism industry in the Southlands and in southern Israel and in the desert. And I know never has any one of our tourists ever walked away from an experience with you and said, "Oh, that was okay." It was always, "Wow, that was amazing." So I really appreciate it. I look forward to when tourism comes back to bring more tourists to you. Chag Sameach, happy Passover. And I hope to see you again soon. Thank you for your time. I just want to shout out to Jonathan Rose, Jono, our tech guru and travel specialist in his own right. There he is. Thank you once again, Jono. And we will all see you again very soon. Take care.
Thank you. Be well.